Hello, everyone. I hope you can all hear me well. I've been already told that sometimes the microphone is actually not in the right position, so I hope you can hear me. Who of you is running AlmaLinux already in a fleet for quite some time in production? No surprise, actually, but that makes actually the next slide a bit simpler. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's when you work in IT. Um, therefore, I guess most of this you already know by heart, but we also see a lot of customers that actually fleet from CentOS at some point into an AlmaLinux fleet. And the reasons are quite obvious. I mean, it's one of the most certified enterprise Linux that you can deploy. And especially when it comes to security, a lot of the security features are already baked in. Some of them are already pre-configured, so there's not so much you need to do, but of course, there are always tweaks. And I also think when you watch the news, security is actually getting more and more important. But on the other hand, it's also getting, the pace of attacks is getting also increasingly, I would say, massive. What happened in a couple of weeks or months in the past is now actually going down to maybe you have a couple of days to patch your systems, especially when they're facing the internet. Sometimes you only have a couple of hours. That really depends on the application. A lot of vulnerabilities and exploits in the meantime, they get released, they get published, and some vibe coding guy is creating an exploit within a couple of minutes. Or they even let agentic tools like a Claude Code or so just actually start the whole attack once they actually found a victim. So in general, having security, of course, is not really a bad thing, and the security first is even better, but it doesn't stop with the operating system itself, also the applications, of course. But the most important part is, of course, then also that the application or that the operating system is well maintained from a patching perspective, from also a planning perspective. So that also means extended lifetime, so that you are not actually getting or letting down after a couple of years when you don't upgrade to a new distribution or to a new major version. And the community, in case of AlmaLinux, of course, extremely important. And one thing that we are very proud of as well, it's the last one on the security first section, it's ImmuDB. So that was one of our most famous open source contributions. It's immutable database. And this immutable database open source is also being used to notarize all the commits that go into AlmaLinux. So it's not easy, I would say, or nearly impossible to tamper with it. The other thing is about vulnerabilities in general. So when it comes to patching, the patching process, of course, you would like to actually patch as often as possible, but nevertheless, the vulnerability is typically the trigger. So you actually look at vulnerabilities. Am I vulnerable to certain critical high vulnerabilities? And then you start patching. But you need to know what kind of patch actually is available, and the overall files are one of the files that make it quite straightforward to figure out if your system is vulnerable to a certain CVE and if a patch exists. In the end, if they actually is vulnerable but there is no patch, there's typically not much you can do except of hardening the system, but that is next. Is overall something that all of you already know, are aware of? So it's actually, it started a little bit different, but the overall file is basically an XML file, and the XML file contains the packages with the versions and the vulnerabilities. But I would say the intentions were very good, but over time it became very cumbersome to work with, despite all the flexibility that was built into the language itself and into the structure. So therefore, in the meantime, we are going to see more and more movement towards a new version or a new way of describing vulnerabilities and supporting the patch management. But in using AlmaLinux, you have all the possibilities. So if you actually want to stick with over files, there is an over stream that is maintained. Tools, open source tools, as well as closed source tools can use it, of course for free. And the next iteration is going to be, I think it's still on. Yeah. And the next iteration will be the CSA OSV. The big difference here is, so we don't need to cover the past, but actually the overall file itself is basically a description of vulnerabilities, patches, and versions, while the OSV file is more like it's also called a VEX. In a VEX, you can think of like a response file to a vulnerability. So instead of just describing the packages that are affected, VEX is more describing that you as a vendor have a vulnerability, so the package maintainer have a vulnerability, and next to either fixing it or not, you can describe why. So for example, you have a library, and this library has a vulnerability, but it cannot be reached. Then you don't need to fix the vulnerability itself, but at least with the SRF and the OSV, you can describe why you are not going to fix it. So from an audit perspective and also from a security perspective itself, it's of course important you still know these are the vulnerabilities I'm affected of. This is the reason why either a patch exists or why no patch exists, and you can basically skip the vulnerability. So it's just not reachable, or there are many different answers to it as well. It could also be, won't be fixed. That is, of course, the worst thing. But it could also be some sort of triaging. So you're going to see the next version with the major upgrade also. But it's a great guideline also for vulnerability management tools, that they can give you a much better response and a much better reporting capabilities, saying these are the vulnerabilities you are affected of, these are the vulnerabilities you should patch immediately, these are the vulnerabilities you can delay, or these are kind of vulnerabilities you can ignore. All these sources you have on different feeds, and the sources are getting feeded up to date, of course. So the unfortunate part is a bit the whole CVE procedure and vulnerability procedure was funded quite well a couple of years ago, but it's not well funded anymore. Therefore, the amount of CVEs is going up and up and up, but they're not really getting redacted. So you don't see a lot of CVEs that make it into I would say, into proper standard for vendors and communities to fix it. And that is for sure an issue that a lot of companies are working on, and also LLM and AIs are going to take their share in it. But if you actually work with overall file JSON feeds and also the OSV feeds, you are actually pretty secure from an audit perspective. Of course, always something can happen, and of course there can be vulnerabilities that are unknown, but therefore the hardening part is then the next thing to take a look at. But before we go into the hardening part, there are tools you can already use today without paying anything. One of these open source tools, it's called OpenSCAP. OpenSCAP is basically taking overall files and other sources, and it's running on your system or on a remote system, so you can also use an SSH connection to scan another system, and it's presenting you a report with the findings. These findings are vulnerabilities, but also hardening checks. So it goes into different security features and what you can do. So it's also going to provide you with the mitigation steps, for example. So install a patch, or if it's an hardening, do the following SSH settings. So it's always coming not just with a kind of a response you're affected, it also gives you a mitigation guideline. But it's not meant for fleets, so it's typically one-on-one. So you look at a certain system, and the next system, the next system. If you want to do it on a fleet base, you probably need to use automation or tools that are already out there that do the automation when it comes to getting a report of 1,000 systems or 500 systems instead of 5. The overall part, it's pretty straightforward, simple script. You could also extend it if you like. And there are some downsides to it. One downside for sure is when it comes to live patching, so that you don't need to install a patch and reboot, but you have a live patching subscription, then these tools typically fail. So they don't look into any memory patching. They only look into the patches that are on disk when installed. The other thing is typically these tools check all kernels you have installed. It doesn't matter if you actually use only 1 out of 10 that is on disk. They're going to present you with the findings for all the 10 kernels. So therefore you need to actually be sure that you clean up also the kernels that you actually have on your system. Otherwise you get a lot of dead vulnerabilities that you potentially have to tackle. And typically you don't run Linux just for having an operating system. You typically have an application on top of it. And of course more and more applications are either Kubernetes or they are Docker or jar files or whatever kind of applications you are running. Unfortunately, Trivi is today a very bad example. I'm not sure if you follow the news, but Aqua Security and Trivi, they actually have been hacked a couple of days ago. So somebody got their, it started actually with a GitHub token that a company they acquired 3.5 years ago, I think, to protect software supply chain security, had in their repositories, and they didn't delete it. Full permissions, so somebody got hold of it, and then that is the bad story of LLMs and AI. Once you have access to something like this, it takes you literally 2 minutes and you took over all the repositories of this maintainer. So I think there are around 50 repositories. Some of the tools, like for example, Trivi, have thousands or 10,000s of downloads every hour, and they have all been compromised. So I wouldn't always go with the latest version, but that I think was never a good idea. But for Trivi, I wouldn't now exit this building and start downloading it. They are still mitigating the damage. Nevertheless, it's a very good software. Anybody ever used Trivi? Ripe? No? These are actually very handy tools because they are single binary. They download their own database. So you can also use them in combination. They have sources for many, many different vulnerability databases. And you can point them either to a folder. So if you have, for example, an application, Java application, Python, whatever, doesn't matter. They support pretty much all typical development languages. So you can either look at the source, or you could actually look at the binary. If it's a Java binary, a Go binary, Rust, they can also look into the code. Of course, if it's compiled C, it starts to be cumbersome. But for most modern development languages, they actually can also look into binary. And they can also look up existing images that you have on disk and running images. So you could also have a mix of running image and the volume that is mounted with the container image, for example. Nevertheless, of course, there are also limits to that. If somebody is copying a file into a running container and you just scan the container image, then there's still another binary in the container. But nevertheless, these tools give you already a very, very good way to at least tackle the standard security issues that you might have. Gripe, and it's also a combination. So both can also create a software bill of materials. So you don't need to get the software bill of material from the maintainer or the vendor. You just can create these yourself. And you could build a kind of a catalog or an inventory of all the libraries and all the systems that you're using. And you could even then scan the whole library or the whole catalog of the systems and your whole inventory in the backend to actually get a much better overview about what you are currently running. One of the things, for example, that happened a couple of weeks ago, that was a so-called React for Shell So whenever somebody was running a React service, a web service, in a certain version, somebody with just a normal payload could execute any code on the server. And this was released, I think, on a Monday, and on a Friday, the first exploit was there. And then the week after, it really spread it, and all the IP ranges were automatically checked, scanned, and the exploit was being tried. So it was some kind of a log4j for the web service era, I would say. And the Trivia and Cripe would be able to detect it. Not, of course, without the CVE and that the CVE is published, but with the CVE published, they would detect it. And they could automatically start the mitigation. So in this case, it was pretty straightforward, upgrading the React version, and I think the Versal version as well. What I can always recommend is, of course, the combination. So even if you just collect the SBOMs, you could also have a folder or a Git repository just with all the SBOMs, and then you only run Trivia or Cripe across all these SBOMs every single day. So then you don't need to run it on the server side all the time. There are more open source tools that you can use. Many of them you probably already, or one or the other you probably already have in use. So Linux is a very common system auditing tool. It's really meant for audits in general, that you see what kind of applications you are running, what is the security level of it, how good is the job that you do to harden the system. So you basically get a rating also from an audit perspective, and you can run it against PCI DSS or ISO and other audit certifications. And SCAP is kind of OpenSCAP, just with a GUI, a nicer GUI. Wazoo is already a monitoring theme platform that you can use. So you also send events into it, log files into it, and you can also do telemetry. So that goes more to the application level as well. Fail to ban, I think it's, you probably all know and use it. But this fail to ban becomes more and more important because so many attacks are now happening from the internet in seconds, or basically very shortly after an exploit is known and publicly available. The last thing that I read is that somebody runs a system that is just checking for new CVEs and automatically creating or writing exploits in a loop to actually publish the exploits. So that means the time from detection to exploit is going to be down probably by, let's say, half a day with testing. They also do some testing. So we are soon in hours how much time we are going to have, especially when you're facing the internet with the application. Of course, file integrity monitoring is one thing. It's also quite important when you have teams that are using AI tools, because AI tools are also going to check the file system. And even if you give them a nice rule and you say you shouldn't touch and you should never look into a .env file, they're still doing it. So you need to be careful, and it's better to actually watch for it and understand if a leak, or basically your credentials were leaked by using these tools. What happens also quite often is that a software like a Cloud Code is asking you, hey, I can set it up for you, I just need the API key, and then I do the setup. And then, of course, if you put it into the prompt, you don't know where the key is going to be used. But I think that is a little bit of common sense, but nevertheless, what we see with OpenClaw is that convenience beats security pretty quick. Nevertheless, coming back to the topic, I mean, the number one topic for sure is the system updates. I know it sometimes is tough because an application could go down because of an update, or there's a version conflict. Nevertheless, the system updates is probably the best thing you can do, patching in time. The next best thing, of course, is in the SSH lockdown. Anybody who ever started a system internet facing, after a couple of seconds you have the first visitors knocking your door. So you should always be careful not to open too many ports, and especially also then locking down SSH. And these SSH attacks are also getting more and more, I would say, advanced, what they do in the meantime. firewalling, of course, the SE-Linux enforcement sometimes can be cumbersome to maintain. Nevertheless, it's actually also very good to keep tooling outside of your secret files and to avoid that secrets are being leaked, that they are in a .env file, for example. And I mean, the other part, password policies, I think that's pretty common that you actually check for it. But the networking part, I would say the file system, file integrity and networking part is getting more and more important. So all these attacks that are currently happening, in the end, they need to come from the network. And the more internet-facing your systems are, the more you need to lock them down. You don't have so much time anymore when vulnerability pops up. Of course, you can do a lot of these things manually. There are also solutions like the Cloud Linux solution that comes with live patching, so that you don't need a downtime to patch for certain vulnerabilities, or you have an end-of-life system, so you cannot really upgrade. Then also solutions like Cloud Linux got them covered. We provide a solution that is called Guardian, that does vulnerability scanning based on all the files that I mentioned, but also doing the CIS part. And we have an AI-powered engine as well, where you could ask questions, where you could also get more and more information from, I would say, security point of view, but also how to mitigate pretty quick. And I'm not sure if this slide is going to be shared, but otherwise, feel free to actually take a picture, because you get a free account if you actually are going to use this URL in the next couple of days, so until 1st of April. And in Guardian, we actually focus completely on Linux security, vulnerabilities, hardening, and mitigation. And this mitigation part is going to be something that we focus more and more on. So also detecting a lot more network connections, log attacks. So for example, when you have SSH connections that suddenly happen, and this guy is trying it for 14 days, and now suddenly he found a way to get in. So these kind of anomalies, we are also using a lot of function or technology to detect these kind of attacks. The benchmarking part, I already mentioned the hardening part, but CIS benchmark is basically the standard for it. AlmaLinux is releasing it since the beginning. So AlmaLinux 8 is already level 4, version 4. And AlmaLinux 9 and 10 is also covered. 10 was just released. And there are close to 200 checks on the system about hardening the system. And that is also something that you can actually use OpenSCAP for. You can use many other software products for that do this fully automated for you, and then you get a report back. So you could also design and structure the hardening part. What is also quite neat is that you typically get mitigation steps. That is something you get with OpenSCAP. You also get with Guardian. So it's not just about, this is what we found, you should configure it like this, but you also get the mitigation script, typically as an Ansible script or a shell script that you could run. And potentially also roll back. So you run it, if it fails, you roll back. So that is something that is typically baked in already. And then last but not least, that is something that we are focusing on more and more, but I can only recommend to basically don't let the new weapons just with the attackers. Cloud Code, for example, and there are also many others, are extremely good, not just in finding out how hardening or how a system could be hardened. They are also extremely good in forensics. So whenever you have the feeling somebody could have attacked or something could have leaked, these tools are very, very good in doing forensics for you. Also checking, for example, cloud accounts, checking the application itself, checking also if an application can be attacked and is vulnerable. So I can only recommend to look deeper into these. You can download certain skills for these AI tools, and these skills are automatic or are already prepared for it's a security audit of a web service, or it's a security audit of a Linux system, or it's a security audit for SSH. And they propose you, actually, they, of course, the findings, but they also propose you then how you could potentially mitigate. If you are, if you think that actually you trust the LLM so much, then you could also ask it to mitigate. That's something you can work more and more on. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that will be the counter measure, because attackers are currently also trusting the LLM to attack you. So in the end, they're already doing it. But one thing not to miss is something that nobody likes to do is documentation. And then also having always up-to-date documentation. So something that we also do in-house is we have an SSH setup with read accounts, and we let the LLM run through all the servers and document everything. So we have on a daily basis a full documentation about the running services, the versions, everything is automatically documented, and nobody needs to write it down themselves. That is, I think, also the game changer when it comes to documentation and also proof. So whenever you have an audit, the documentation's there, everything is updated, and you even have a hardening guide that is also basically automatically documenting. And the costs are, I would say, if you go for a normal account with $20, $50 a month, you can already do pretty much everything with it. And that was what I was mentioning about the skills. So there are also GitHub accounts where you can get skills for these tools. And I can only recommend to look into them because they really save you a lot of time, not just doing research, but also defining plans. Not necessarily the automation itself, but defining plans and giving you a proper documentation and a guideline what to do next, what to tackle next, and what are the most important things. And even to connect them with most up-to-date information. So you could, for example, connect them with the feed about overalls, with the feed about CVEs, vulnerabilities, and so on. Oh, I can, yeah. So that's from my side. Thank you very much. And I hope that we get the bad guys blocked faster than the attackers.